All right, so the Department of Education has been forever a boondoggle. Education should be done at the local and state level. Parents should be in charge of the education of their children, whether you're in private school or public school. The reality is, the more local the education, the more it reflects the needs, desires, and wants of the parents, who, of course, are the ones most aligned with the interests of their children. Instead, we in the United States have increasingly devolved authority to the federal government. And the federal government, virtually all of its agencies, have been hijacked, as we've now been learning, by a left-wing bureaucratic mess designed as a permanent pipeline of cash to the friends of the Democrats. And this is particularly true of the Department of Education. In fiscal year 2024, the Department of Education spent $268 billion. That is a lot of money. And since 1980, the DOE spending has increased 372%, which is almost double the increase of the size of the rest of the federal government. So the DOE has been growing by leaps and bounds. Now, most of that goes to subsidize precisely the sort of indoctrination centers that have been churning out radicals in extraordinary numbers, corrupting our body politic for decades. If you don't like the Hamas tentifadas on campus last year, you can blame the fact that we as a society have decided it is deeply imperative that we send all of our teenagers to institutions of higher education that indoctrinate them in trash. You can blame that on the fact that our lower education institutions, secondary education, like high school, primary education, has been indoctrinating kids in left-wing values for literally as long as I have been alive. When it comes to higher education, last year, the Department of Education spent $165 billion on higher education. That's nearly half the total spend of the entire department. That's money that went to colleges and universities to prop up the great scam that is, again, higher education. Those are grants to students to go major in lesbian dance theory. You're wondering how they got that money? The answer is you got to pay for it. Just $40 billion went directly to elementary and secondary education. So even if you wanted the money going to the small kids, it's not actually going to the small kids. Predominantly, it is going to the very large overgrown children who are 19 and 20 years old majoring in nonsense. The dollars went, at least in part, at the lower level, to the grifters and cretins of the unions, like the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association. Not directly to them, but when federal dollars go to subsidize schools that are in bed with the AFT and the NEA, you get to subsidize the work of Randy Weingarten. Some of this stuff goes to waste and fraud, and that doesn't include the $68.1 billion in indirect spending. Those are block grants, largely, that are given to states. So, what have been the priorities of the Department of Education lately? Well, according to Joe Biden's Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, quote, "The investments proposed in President Biden's new budget reflect this administration's deep belief in education as the foundation of all opportunity in America. The goal is to raise the bar for college affordability, inclusive student success, and driving more equitable outcomes in higher education." Equity, of course, is a code word for, effectively, racial quotas. That's at least how Biden saw it. Biden requested $100 million for, quote, "developing and implementing strategies to promote diversity in their schools and classrooms." And here we're not just talking about racial quotas. We are talking about the curriculum itself. We are talking about the kinds of material that get taught. Well, President Trump came into office pledging to kill DEI programs at our nation's schools. The Department of Education apparently handed out $1 billion in DEI grants since 2021 alone. Some 229 grants pushing DEI, according to Parents Defending Education. That included $490 million for grants for race-based hiring schemes, which are illegal under the Constitution. $169 million for DEI-based mental health training. $343 million on general DEI programs. That's just over the past few years.